another thing that I kind of found strange, I recently watched the video, and in this particular video, it didn't have anything to do with Allison. It was a cousin speaking about her 13-year-old cousin. In that video, she stated that her auntie met a man, and this man was open and upfront with her and let her know that he spent 10 years in jail for actually SAing a 13-year-old. He let her know up front that he was a predator. She still got involved with him. And then they stated that they knew, and they kept reporting it to CPS, that their 13-year-old cousin was being abused. They didn't say by who, and they did not mention, because she was being interviewed, they did not mention the mother, what was going on with the mother. They did not state why, knowing that there was a child around, because she also stated that her auntie had an 11-year-old child from the man who was a predator. No, she knew he didn't sneak into the family. They allowed this predator into the family. And so he came around the child when she was around 1 or 2, because if they got an 11-year-old and she became missing at 13, so that would mean he had to be around while she was 1 or 2. Why she was in the household or around him, knowing that he was a predator, I don't know. But they kept saying it's CPS fault because CPS didn't do anything. They presented all this information to CPS, but CPS didn't do anything. CPS. And that was frustrating me, because I was trying to understand, why is it CPS fault when you allow a predator, the family allow a predator to be, if the auntie wanted to be with that person, no kid should have been able to go to auntie house while the predator was there. That predator would have not been able to walk into my household, regardless of how he feeling. I don't trust you around a child when I know you spent 10 years in jail because of your fetish with a child. But, but they kept blaming CPS, and that did not make sense to me. And then with this situation with Allison, they're also blaming CPS, saying that it's CPS fault, which don't make sense to me, because if you got all this evidence presented, be transparent, put that evidence out there so people who can help these kids will be able to see it. But if you got evidence and you're not willing to put it out there, just like you put it out there on the internet, you could put it, your affidavit, you could put that information out there.
3 months ago, I made a video about Allie Carter, and towards the end of the video, I spoke about Na Ziyah and how I did not understand how her auntie would be willing to be involved with the man who was accused and actually went to prison for SA of a child. I'm going to share with you the original video that I seen.
Joining us from Detroit, Michigan, Na Ziyah Harris's cousin, Roxy. Roxy, thank you so much for joining us. This is a huge development in the case. Wanted to get first your reaction to the prosecutor, Kim Worthy, making the announcement that the charges have been brought in this case.
It's definitely a sense of relief here to finally be able to hear her say those words that we've been knowing from the beginning. Like I said in our last interview, we, considering his background and things like that, we had our suspicions, and we're glad that they finally came to light today.
So can you explain for us the connection of Jarvis Butts and Na Ziyah and Na Ziyah's family and your family?
The connection with Jarvis was Na Ziyah's aunt boyfriend. And they also have children together as well. So that was how he was able to be around the family as the immediate family that Na Ziyah was living with, I assume as often as he wanted to be.
And his history, how well did people know his history and what he liked to do, which was prey upon children?
His history was very well known. I mean, he did do time in prison before for sexual misconduct of a 13-year-old girl or under as well. And I think he did 10 years in prison for that as well. And it was also very well known to her aunt, who was her boyfriend, that he let it be known to her as well that he was also, a sexual predator, and he left the decision up to her whether she wanted to continue to have a relationship with him, and she continued to have a relationship with him, knowing that he previously had those charges against him, did time for it, and that he was a registered sex offender.
How long? Because what the prosecutor said, Prosecutor Worthy, long-term sexual abuse, and that's the part that just breaks your heart. How long did he have access to Na Ziyah?
From what the prosecutor said, they said that they have messages going back to 2022. However, I personally believe that he's been around the family longer than that, considering the fact of the amount of children that he has with Na Ziyah's aunt. And those children, I think the oldest is probably 11 or 12 years old. So he's been around for a while.
I want to take a listen to the prosecutor here, who was answering a question during this press conference. Let's take a listen.
Some of Na Ziyah's relatives said they previously had talked to CPS about allegations of sexual abuse from Na Ziyah and other kids. Did that ever make it to your office? Is it something that police have investigated before?
Yeah, let me just say this, that if anyone that is watching this press conference right now, or reads any of the coverage that I'm sure that you will give this, has any reason to believe that they were a victim of his or that they know something else, we certainly welcome them to contact the Detroit Police Department.
So it wasn't a direct answer to the question. But Roxy, from the position of the family, is there any level of frustration that the family knew of this? They were reaching out and nothing was done. Is anyone, like, there's obvious blame? Jarvis Butts is the one, right? But is there any level of shared blame amongst anyone else who didn't do anything here?
I mean, absolutely. There's definitely lots of frustration within the family. There were family members that called CPS several times. There were family members that called the police as well, and nothing came of it. CPS is supposed to be, safeguard welfare for our children, and they're supposed to be able to respond promptly and do thorough investigations to be able to negate, reports of abuse and neglect. And because of the reports of the abuse and the neglect and the molestation that were reported to Child Protective Services, and for it to just seem like there wasn't a thorough investigation being done, or just turned a blind eye, and unfortunately it's brought us to this very unfortunate event, which is my cousin being deceased today.
That's exactly the problem, right? It's Child Protective Services. That we want them to protect them before this happens. If we know of something, see something, say something, make a report, and unfortunately, Na Ziyah was not protected in all of that.
When I initially seen that video, I had a hard time understanding how it was CPS' fault that Na Ziyah was missing at the time and now presumed not alive. The reason I had so hard of a time understanding why it was CPS' problem or why it was CPS' fault was because Jarvis Butts actually let Shannon, I think that's her aunt's name, Shannon, actually let her know that he was a convicted sex offender against a child. And she was still okay with being in a relationship with him. And then once I watched some of the trial with the different people being on stand, it answered a lot of questions as far as how he got access to Na Ziyah Harris. Initially, the auntie Shannon, she was living in her own place, and her and Jarvis ended up having 5 kids together. And her oldest was 11 at the time, and a girl. They moved in with her mother, which is Na Ziyah's grandmother. Na Ziyah's grandmother had basically adopted her and was raising her, basically, I would say, since birth. And so the grandmother stated that she had 9 kids, that she was, that was within the household. So he was coming over to visit his kids, the 5 kids that he had with her auntie. And see, that's the problem, because when he's a registered sex offender, so that means he's not supposed to be around any kids. Laws vary when it comes to their own kids. If they hadn't done anything to their own kids, then they can be around their own kids. But they're not supposed to have any contact with any other kids. And it's hard for me to feel or believe that the auntie and the grandmother, which was now her adopted mother, would be okay for her to even call him uncle, would be okay for them to send her and the oldest daughter, his daughter, and Na Ziyah to the shop to clean up. Why would you give a known sex offender, a pedophile that's not supposed to have access to any kids, why would you give him access to Na Ziyah and even his daughter by himself? Why would you allow them to go to the shop and clean up? And then it broke my heart when I heard the grandmother say Na Ziyah, she was a good kid. When she got home from, when school was over, she got on the bus, she came straight home. They never had any issue with her. The first time she did not come home from school, they looked for her. They did not find her, but instead of calling the police, they went to bed. Instead of going by the shop to see if maybe Na Ziyah was at the shop by herself, they did not do that. There's a wolf, not even a wolf in sheep clothing. There is a wolf, a predator amongst your family, and you don't call the police. You don't say, well, maybe he did something to Na Ziyah, but instead you go to bed, you go to sleep, and then decide to wake up the next day with your regular routine, not even a rush to get to call the police and say, no, she didn't come home last night. This is a 13-year-old child. Where do you think a 13-year-old child who never said anything about running away, never ran away, a child that you never had any problems with, she don't come home from school and you don't see that as a issue, something that you should be so concerned that you call the police right away and say, okay, I went to check the school. I called her friends. No one's seen her. I went to the shop to see if she was there because she has been going there cleaning up. He is a known pedophile. So I want to make sure you know where he's at and that Na Ziyah is not with him. None of that crossed their minds, the auntie nor the mother. And then the other thing that bothers me is he had a girlfriend. He was still on and off with Na Ziyah auntie Sharon. He had another woman that had kids. He had a kid from another one. All these women. What is it about him, a known pedophile, that y'all comfortable with bringing him around your kids, or that you even want to have kids with him? Then the other thing, the auntie, his sister stated that she had went by the shop and she seen Na Ziyah. At the time, she didn't know it was Na Ziyah. She just seen a little girl there. Your brother is a pedophile. Your brother is a registered sex offender and he's not supposed to be around children. You didn't get concerned about that child and think, oh, maybe he's up to his old ways again? Let me tell him to send that girl home. Let me speak to her and see where she's supposed to be at, and I'll take her home. But you leave her there. You said nothing. You do nothing. And then all these people that know this man is a registered sex offender do nothing when there's children in his presence and he's not supposed to be around any children. This is why it's important that as parents, you speak to your kids when you know someone that may be in the family, or in that situation the auntie decided she wanted to get involved with a sex offender. That's when you let the child know, when they get old enough to understand, hey, If you're walking home from school or if you're somewhere he's offering to give you a ride, say no. Do not get in a vehicle with him because he's not supposed to be around children. You have to make sure that these children understand that person is a predator, that person is dangerous, and you don't want him to hurt you. So don't call him no uncle. Don't get in the car with him. Don't go nowhere with him. No, you cannot go to the shop and clean up. You have to do whatever you can to protect your children, but you have to also educate your children as far as what's going on. Did they ever have that conversation with Na Ziyah? I don't know. Did they ever explain to her that he's a registered sex offender? I don't know. But they dropped the ball. And then when the cousin kept saying they tried to call CPS, call the police. He's breaking the law by being around children. So he should automatically be they could automatically take him to jail for violating his part of his release from jail, which is you cannot be around children. But I feel that because if you're calling CPS, who are you really calling it on? Are you calling it on the grandmother, the one who's actually taking care of Na Ziyah and supposed to be making sure Na Ziyah is okay? Because she's given this man access to her granddaughter every time she send her to the shop, knowing what this man has done before to other kids. Are you calling on the auntie Shannon? Same thing. She know who he is, but still allow him to be around other kids. She can't, like I said, laws vary when it comes to the individual's own kids, but Na Ziyah is not his child. Why would you have her calling him? Why would you have her texting him? Why would you put her in his presence in any way, shape, or form? That man would have had to meet her somewhere else. She would have had to go somewhere else to meet that man. He would have never been able to pull up in my driveway, knowing what he done did to two other kids. And this is the thing I truly don't understand about people. And instead of holding these people accountable, they push it to CPS. And that's the same issue when I had made that original video when I was talking about Allison. She kept saying she had all this information on CPS, 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 and it just didn't make any sense. And I had the same feeling with this one when they kept yelling CPS. It didn't make any sense to me. And I want to play you part of what the judge had to say.
Before I get into the charges, and the main charge of premeditated first-degree murder, I have to speak on Na Ziyah Harris and the community who failed her. And I'm only presented with such evidence. I don't know the whole story. The attorneys know more than me. The family knows more than me. But from what I have heard over the last 4 days and 5 days total, is that several people failed her. I don't know where her mother is. I don't know anything other than that she was forced to live in a home where she was not protected or given the adequate attention and love. I don't know where her father is. I don't have any mention of him in her life. No presence. To Cordell, a.k.a. King, and all the men who saw Jarvis Butts hanging out and always around these young girls, including Na Ziyah, and his 9-year-old daughter going up to the shop to clean up his shop. The school counselor who never showed up, or the person who was supposed to show up if that counselor was absent, after Na Ziyah was on the floor on the day she went missing, saying that she needed to speak to someone and speak to a counselor. There's no mention of CPS, but I wonder what their involvement was over the years, because this was not just a one-year thing. There are text messages at least from 2022. To her adoptive grandmother, Annette Harris, whose testimony, in my opinion, was very questionable. I understand why the people put her on the stand to establish Na Ziyah's residence and the houses on Bedford and the regular routine, to establish also that Na Ziyah was not a runaway child, that she was not a bad kid. I do believe she adopted Na Ziyah. I do believe that she had 6 kids in the house. I believe that Na Ziyah had on a dark hoodie the day she went missing, and that she had on red and black Nikes that day. What is hard to believe is that the defendant never came into the house as she testified. And there was also a minor that testified that he did as well. Text messages that showed between him and Na Ziyah that he did in the basement, saying he was going to the shower, stealing her panties. He was always lurking around the house and asking for Janiyah and Zaniyah, from what I know. I even thought about the breakfast routine and saying that all the kids like eating breakfast at school. Did they have a choice? I don't know. But to always send those girls up there to clean up the shop raises questions. And how were there two women in that house who had birthed children themselves who did not notice that Na Ziyah was pregnant, and I believe she was, and not having her period anymore? But then after hearing text messages today, begging Jarvis for pads as if she didn't have anyone else to give it for her. And what stood out the most was when Annette Harris stood on the stand, and she learned around 6 p.m. that Na Ziyah did not come home from school, and said she looked around for her and decided to wait until the next morning to call the police. Without a tear, without emotion, or any expression of being devastated. And to her Aunt Shannon, who also showed no emotion, expression of being devastated from Na Ziyah going missing. She stated that she had friends help look for Na Ziyah, but was directed to just wait until the morning to call the police. A grown woman who likely suspected something strange going on didn't feel the need to call the police either. They were both able to go to sleep at night without hearing from Na Ziyah or having any indication that she was coming home at night. And of course, the defendant, who I will get to in a minute. I don't know who else failed Na Ziyah, but the community did. So I want you to pay attention and listen to everything I have to say. I have been trying to figure out for the last 5 days, you. At one point, I thought you were cognitively impaired in the beginning of this exam. And then maybe you had the brain of a 10-year-old, and that's why you were doing such things. But as I heard more and more testimony, you're just a true definition of a pedophile. Watching you laugh and brag about all the women you have with different women and the children and the girlfriends, and making babies to groom them, and having them in your presence, cleaning up your shop, and the little girls around you, has landed you here today. You groomed Na Ziyah. You played mind games with her. We all heard that. You controlled her emotionally. She was exposed to so much at such a young age. The text messages between you two were disgusting to hear. And to think that she had you saved in her phone as babe for life. Na Ziyah deserves so much more. And while I mentioned other people that failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster in this whole picture. She did deserve love from her parents and everyone who was in her life. She was ignored, she was neglected, and you took complete advantage of that. She wanted someone to love her, and she will never know what that feels like. Your children deserve more. As much as defense counsel has raised issues on count one, all that has done is raise the question of fact for the trier of fact, which means that this would be for a jury or a judge to hear in Third Circuit. I pray for the healing of all the victims and the young girls and possibly boys who have come into contact with you. As a community, we should look at this case as a prime example of how much work we have to do when it comes to protecting our children and especially our Black girls. I pray for closure and healing for all those who have been traumatized by you. And for you, Jarvis Butts, I wish you a speedy trial and that justice be delivered.
And you see what the judge had to say. She said herself she wasn't even sure if CPS was called or aware of the situation because he actually started grooming her around when she was 11. He was sending her pictures. He was texting her. He was doing all that. He started when she was 11 years old. So, he already put his mark on her to, eventually do what he did to her. He's 41 years old. What do you see with a 13-year-old? And then got her pregnant on top of that. Then was searching online, different ways to have a natural abortion to be able to abort the child. And when it comes to, like, they they never found the body. So, there's a 50% chance that she's actually no longer here, and there's a 50% chance that she is. They found some of her stuff near the border. I think it was Detroit and Canada border, on Detroit side. When they was looking for her, it was like a river that they found some of her belongings, that they was able to say, yeah, that was hers. But they don't know. She could be across the border for all they know. She could have went down the river. So unless they find a body, or he confessed to what he actually did, or some other evidence come out, it is they're presuming that she's no longer alive, but that's all that is a presumption. But when it comes to these people, all this does is just reconfirm what I already know. People will go out their way to protect the predator. Even when they see they got their eyes on someone, even when they see they're moving wrong, they will still go out their way to protect the predator and have no concern about the child. It was a lot of people that knew what type of person he was and did absolutely nothing. They didn't call the police and say, okay, I don't like the fact that he's around these kids. I don't like the fact that he's around these girls. They looked up past that and just continued to, treat him like he was normal. He's not normal. He's a predator. That's not normal. And then all these other women that wants to get involved with him and have other children with him, and allow him around their kids. And then if you don't know him, and your sister or your auntie or your mother is dating him, she's actually putting your life in danger as well, because he's a predator, and you don't know who he's going to set his eyes on, and who he's going to try to attack next. This is just a sad story.